Hello anyone and everyone. Thank you for stopping by to view this video. Just a quick note before I begin, it is my goal to start making more content on this channel as well as the Centenary United Methodist Church YouTube channel, with the goal eventually being weekly content made available. Here I'll be talking about current events that are going on in the world with a specific focus on how we might want to view those events through the lens of our faith. Some of these things are, by their very nature, going to be more opinionated than others, just a warning. But always will be grounded. My goal, of course, is to be in Scripture. But I'll be covering a wide array of various topics, anything from Scripture to church history, anything that I think may be of use or valuable to any of you. So with all that said, if you hit the notification bell, and if you subscribe to this channel as well as the Centenary channel, you'll be notified when any new video is uploaded or any new content added. So with all of that said, thanks again for stopping by. Let's get into today's topic. Several weeks ago on a Sunday morning during service, we were talking about eschatology. And I noted how when it comes to the end times or the end age, whatever you want to call it, there really is only one answer in all of Scripture. One answer that we can possibly derive from Scripture as to the when these things will happen. The answer being, we don't know. Yet despite how Jesus is so explicit in saying that nobody would know, that he himself doesn't know when he's returning, people from the beginning have constantly played the guessing game as to when that might be, either by doing some strange arbitrary arithmetic with some numbers that they happen to find in Scripture, or by interpreting the times and the signs that are around them. The latter one of those certainly being much more useful than the former. Interpreting the times that we find ourselves in is good, and it's useful insofar as we can see the world stage being set for Christ's triumphant return. And in that, the things that would and do cause us sadness in the world can at the same time give us a great sense of joy. Because while we don't know the when, we always know it's drawing nearer. And that day is not a day to mourn over, but to anticipate and to rejoice in, for deliverance of the universe is at hand. But on that Sunday, I did something different, and I also took a brief moment to sort of debunk a widely circling theory out there that we now are in the midst of that period, of the tribulation period specifically, that we are somehow living in those 7 years of Jacob's trouble. Now, you'd have to put aside what you think about a pre-tribulation rapture, of course, but the whole appearance of the Antichrist, the defilement of the temple, the appearance of the two witnesses, have all somehow come into the world, right under our noses, without us even so much as noticing. And the beast has arrived center stage in the world, and his mark with him. That is COVID the beast, and the vaccine being the mark. That is the theory. And I said at the time, and I stand by it, there's no scriptural way to make that work. And people who have taken the vaccine can be confident that they have not unknowingly just committed some unforgivable sin and marked themselves for hell and destruction. But on that Sunday, what I did also say is that all these things that are happening may be a picture of what is to come. And not to toot my own horn, but I believe the past few weeks have certainly validated that statement. I didn't know at the time just how right I would end up being. COVID, the vaccine, and the masks, and with it vaccine mandates specifically, which are exclusions from society based on your vaccine status, the classes of people that this is all creating. All this comes together to paint a rather disturbing picture. And not that it should give us fear. Christ has overcome. Christ will overcome. But it should at least give us a moment to pause, to think about what has transpired over this past year and a half or so, and to think about the precedents that are being set. But before I go any further, let's have a look at the actual text from Revelation chapter 13, verses 11 through 18. Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. We should note at the very outset, the image depicted here can really hardly look like anything we're specifically facing right now. This was a specific visual that John is given of the Antichrist prophet, of him rising up with great displays of power to deceive the nations and ultimately to set up a one-world religion with the Antichrist as the center to be worshipped. Anyone not willing to worship the image of the beast or the beast, the abomination that makes desolate, is, as we heard, either struck down or unable to participate in buying or selling, excised from commerce and from society entirely. Again, I say, there is really no way to make COVID, the vaccine, the mandates, the masks, the completion or fulfillment of this passage without doing some serious stretching and some very fancy footwork of Scripture, neither of which we should be in the practice of doing. However, and here's the but, I say what we perhaps can see in all of this are pictures, foreshadowings, archetypes. We can see the world stage being set for such a scenario as that to be able and even likely to occur at some point. And there's one thing specifically I want to draw attention to in all of this. I want to offer a rebuttal to a rebuttal that would occur from someone trying to dispute this, to show the differences between what we are experiencing now and what people will experience during the time of the tribulation. Some today would say, and many do say, well, being told you have to wear a mask, being told you have to be vaccinated, or even being excluded from certain places in society based on whether or not you got the jab, is not the same as being told you have to worship anything. I mean, nobody's telling you or forcing you to bow the knee or to prostrate yourself before anything or anyone. That's what people would say, to which I would respond, frankly and a little sarcastically, really? Are you sure about that? After all, how exactly do you define worship? We likely have a very narrow image of it in our minds, Sunday morning, right? Singing hymns, sitting in the pews, hearing the scriptures being read, being taught. But let me remind you all that those are elements of worship, not worship in its entirety. We worship God outside of a church service through our daily lives, through our conduct, through our expressions to Him, of our devotion, of our loyalty, ultimately of our trust and obedience. Worship is really simply showing something or someone a level of respect, reverence, and loyalty. So with that definition in mind, think about all that's occurred as of late in regards to COVID, masks, mandates, vaccines, and more importantly, perhaps all the institutions in America. We have been told and are being told we need to trust the science, despite the fact that science is just a process of discovery. It's not one person, it's not one institution or one being that has all the answers as they sometimes make it out to be. So in other words, put another way, despite not knowing exactly what is going on, despite you not having all the information available, the institutions, the governments, rulers, and authorities, they all get together and say, just trust us. Hopefully you're already starting to see the picture here. Who else is it that asks us of that kind of devotion and trust, and rightly so? But let's take it even further. We are being told to render our absolute faith and our trust into things that nobody can fully comprehend. We are being told We must surrender our choices. We must surrender our ability to make our own decisions, to lead our own lives. Submit it all to a higher authority that knows better than us, that is far better suited to reign over us. And again, that is not the omniscient, all-knowing God of the universe. No. Submit that all to the bumbling, short-sighted group of finite men and women called politicians and leaders. We are told that we should have undying allegiance and loyalty to these people, to bureaucrats, to politicians and scientists. And then to question them is, of course, to be condemned, labeled a lunatic, and essentially, though they wouldn't use these terms, labeled a heretic. Is none of this sounding just a little familiar to you? Does it not sound like the respect, the trust, and obedience and reverence that we owe only to God, that is being demanded from us by people, by men, who are often so far from God that we might dare say, and I sometimes do say, that they directly oppose God, and are not the enemies of God, led by the spirit of the Antichrist, the first beast? For consider this. The same people today who are screaming at us daily to trust the science, as they claim, for an entirely new form of vaccination, never before done in any kind of mass population, these are the same people claiming that they are on the side of science when they say things like, there's no observable or meaningful distinction between a man and a woman. And your feelings, rather than your genetic makeup, that's really what determines your gender and your sex. They are also the ones screaming from the rooftops for us to trust the science, while they tell us things like a baby in a pregnant woman's abdomen is not a baby, it's not a person worthy of protection, not until it breaches the birth canal, at which point it magically, not scientifically, but magically is made into a human being. And let's face it, even then, if there's something wrong with that baby after birth, that's just a conversation that needs to be happening between the woman and her doctor. You get the picture? They let what they call science lead them into killing unborn babies under the guise of women's reproductive rights. And then ask us, actually demand us, to just go along with their science. See, here's what's, for some reason, astonishing to our political and cultural elites. It turns out that when you constantly bend the science to fit your already pre-described desired outcome, people will stop trusting what you call science. Yet nonetheless, these same people have risen up out of the sea to demand from us our allegiance and our obedience. And to question them is to question the very gods of science. Well, I and we as people of faith have a message for all of you who do so. Forget the gods you have formed and forget your so-called science. Our allegiance will never be to you, and our trust is in you as much as you prove yourselves trustworthy and as much as you fear God, which is to say, not very much. When you destroy your own credibility through your lying, through your constant manipulation of the people, and when you ask that we treat you the way we treat the one and only God, our answer is no. When you tell us to bow down and worship, to take the mark of not an experimental vaccine, but the mark of a willingness to just go along with you to get along, a willingness to just obey because you apparently know best, our answer is, friends, our answer must be no. Now let me be clear so this video doesn't end up getting taken down. I've been very consistent from the beginning. If you are vulnerable and you believe it is in your best interest to go and get vaccinated, please go and do so. It is for each person to discern for themselves what is right for them. It's for each person to themselves weigh the risk and the reward of this vaccine. I don't judge, and I don't think anyone should judge those who have gotten it or will get it, feeling it necessary for them. In all of this, my point has far less to do with the vaccine, and more to do with the tactics of coercion being used, more to do with the false gods and the false idols that are popping up left and right, and that we are told we must submit to. My issue lies with these despicable bullying tactics being used by employers and government authorities who are abusing their power in the name of the so-called greater good, despite their lack of transparency, despite their lack of explaining how exactly those measures are going to help. Your being unvaccinated is somehow preventing the vaccine in somebody else to work. Makes sense, right? Just like we all know. If I don't install an antivirus on my own personal computer, no one else's antivirus is going to work, right? And finally, let's not forget about one of the worst aspects of this tribal paganism and this idolatry that is taking place in all of this. And it's a bit of a shocker, but the sacrifice of children. Of course, not just the children themselves, though that is certainly being done, as we have previously discussed in this video. But I'm talking about the mental, emotional, and possibly physical well-being of children in schools. His Majesty, your Majesty, King Wolf, has recently ordered a decree from on high that local schools cannot be in charge of making their own decisions. So all children in all of Pennsylvania needed to wear masks this school year. And again, no real explanation as to why, no data needed as to show why that's necessary or why that's productive. Again, I say, I trust God operating without knowing his full plan, but I don't owe that and I won't give that to anyone else. In all of this, in this scenario, to protect our own sense, that is the adult sense, of safety and security, despite the fact that the vast majority of the population is vaccinated or is already immune from COVID, our children must be subjected to 8 hours a day of wearing masks. Are there long-term studies of the effects of these masks on children? Who cares? Are children becoming depressed because they can't play with their friends, because they can't even see each other smile or recognize each other in the hallway? Doesn't much matter. We adults need to feel safe in a world where nobody is safe. So sacrifices must be made. So come and let us lift up the children to the beast of power and control, of bureaucracy and science, and let those institutions do with our children what they must. All that can't be sacrificed is our sense of safety. All that can't be sacrificed is my sense of safety, despite being 30 years old and relatively good health and fully vaccinated. I mean, sure, the odds of me dying from COVID under those measures are akin to that of being struck by lightning, which is why next, I'm going to start demanding to God that he knock off all that thundering and lightning business too. One last time. The vaccine, the masks, the mandates, none of this is the mark of the beast. But we shouldn't be fooled into thinking that just because A isn't B, doesn't mean A looks a lot similar to B and set the stage and precedent for it. What happens in that passage from Revelation, after all? Consider it broadly. The Antichrist, who is in this point in control of the entire world government, says to the masses of people, unless you do X, you cannot do Y. Tell me that doesn't sound like the past year and a half, where our God-given and God-ordained rights have been routinely and continuously held hostage. And we've been so incredibly and despicably patronized by those who think themselves above us, who think themselves superior to us. I might just put my fist through my TV screen the next time I see a politician on stage treating his constituents like a bunch of puppies or small children. You know, if you listen real good, if you do exactly what I say, and if you play nicely, maybe we'll let you leave your home. And hey, if you're super duper good, we'll let you breathe fresh oxygen. But only until you act up again. This is all writing on the wall, friends. And we needn't fear. But it's good for us to be aware and mindful when that kind of mindset finds so much room in the minds of the people, of the masses, Christians and unbelievers alike. God is always beckoning us, saying, trust me. So we do. So we ought to. We should have to strive to that with our very fiber of our being. But when government and authorities say, trust us, we ought to at the very least raise a brow of serious suspicion. When every institution in our country, from government to big tech, to these billion-dollar global companies with their own incredible amount of influence, when all these things rise up in a blob, a conglomerate of power, and they say to the masses, do as we say, we know best. Bow down and worship, give us your allegiance, just trust us. Trust us with your decisions, trust us with your lives. Just comply. Let us make your choices. When all that happens, forgive the brashness for a moment, but we say to them as clearly as we can, go to hell, Satan. We follow and we worship the one and only true God, the one and only one who has all the answers that you don't, the only one worthy of that respect and that trust that you want. It is reserved for him and no other. We will not bow the knee, and what you want from us is simply not ours to give. So take it up with God, and good luck. Something tells me you're in enough hot water with him as it is.